Hello, hello. Welcome to Crime in Court. You don't need to see my files there. Thank you for joining me. My name is Heather, and this is take two on the first time that I did this. So recently I had to do a reset on my laptop because things were being wonky, and so when I did that and I re-downloaded Streamlabs, which is what I use to stream these, it totally reset my audio settings, and now suddenly my mic was muted on a bunch of pre-recorded videos that I did. It's very frustrating, but at least it wasn't that many. So I'm back doing this one again. I haven't gotten very far in this anyways, so it's all right that I'm starting over. This is the opening statements of Trial 1 of the Adnan Syed case, Maryland versus Adnan Syed. This took place, if you're not familiar, you might have heard of Serial, perhaps. Serial podcast is where, podcasting basically kind of took flight, and true crime podcasting and streaming and all that kind of started was from Serial. And not all of it, but it really catapulted where we're at today. So anyways, because of that reason, I when Serial came out, I was very I listened to it, I streamed it all. I think I even streamed it twice and just listened to it all in full, trying to really decide, because I just walk away with more questions. I don't know if he did it or not, and I still don't know. But as of now, he is, I believe, exonerated, or at least free of not being recharged again. But at this point, I want to go back through the record through these trial transcripts, because I think it's really going to give us an interesting perspective on the podcast that started it all. So, little background: Adnan Syed and Hae Min Lee were here. Let me go to Adnan is in the blue prison suit behind the bars, and Hae Lee is the girl pictured, or I should say young woman pictured on the side there. So they were dating, but at some point they were in high school. It was the year 1999, same year that I graduated. Same year that I graduated from high school. So this case has always kind of had a part of me that I related to it, because I grew up in this time. This is my era. So with that said, we're going to read through the trial transcripts. This is transcript 1, trial 1, day 1, opening statements, and this is a redo. I did it live once before, and unfortunately my mic, like I said, my audio was messed up. So let me zoom in a little bit. This font is awful and difficult to read. And for that purpose, it's one of those where it's four little sections on one page. So I had to really zoom in here. We're really zoomed in. Anyways, let's begin with opening statement by Mr. Urich. As Judge Quarles told you, because the judge already went through jury voir dire, they've had their jury instructions at the beginning already. So at this point, this is now opening statements. So Mr. Urich, the prosecutor, says, as Judge Quarles told you, my name is Kevin Urich. My co-counsel's name is Kathleen Murphy. We're assistant state's attorneys. We're hired by Patricia Jessamy the state's attorney for Baltimore City to prosecute criminal cases in Baltimore City. We're two of approximately 140 attorneys who appear every day in the various courts, criminal courts in Baltimore City trying cases. On behalf of Mrs. Jessamy and the state's attorney's office, I want to thank you for the process you've gone through. Some of you for 2 days, because voir dire had lasted into the next day, into the day that they started opening statements. All right, so he wants to thank them of being selected for this jury and the process that you're going to go through during the course of this trial. We appreciate the fact that you came in to do your civic duty, and we want to thank you in advance. I scrolled the page. Okay. I moved the page and I lost my spot here a second. So we appreciate the fact that you come into this with your civic duty, yada, yada, yada. At this point, I get to give you an opening statement, and which is sort of like a preview of coming attractions that you see at the movie, where you get a couple minutes trailer of what the movie itself is going to be. You're going to hear a lot of evidence in the case, and it's all going to boil down to very simple evidence. So he's equating the opening statement by the prosecution to a movie trailer, which I don't necessarily agree with. Anyways, so you're going to hear a lot of evidence in this case, and it's all going to boil down to very simple evidence. On January 13th of this year, so this was back in hold on, I have, I'm going to double check something real quick, bear with me. I'll show you in 1 second. Where I want to show you the timeline of the trial here. So technically day 1 of the trial, there was no arguments or anything. It was jury voir dire. They discussed preliminary matters, things like that. So then the second day, voir dire is resumed and goes into the day. Jury selection is done. They're sworn in, and preliminary marks are that's trial 2. Son of a, I don't know how it's scrolled down. Okay, so just for reference, we are at this time frame, trial 1 happened December 8th to December 15th, 1999. And just a little teaser, it is mistrialed by day 6. So we're going to read through all the transcripts and the motion for dismissal, or for the mistrial, and we'll read all of that. So it'll be interesting, and then we'll have that information to compare it to trial 2, which started January 21st to February 25th in 2000. So he didn't have to wait that long for it to be rescheduled, which is actually kind of great. Usually, you could wait like months and even years. But anyways, so we're talking about the first trial right now. We're on day 1 of opening statements. So I'm calling it day 1, even though this timeline says day 2, but I'm going to call it day 1 for our purposes of just being clear. All right, so moving on. So this is January 13th of this year. They're talking about, that's when Hae goes missing. So on January 13th of this year, that's 1999, which was a Wednesday, a University of Baltimore, I believe she was, student by the name of Jennifer Pusateri went to call a friend of hers by the name of Jay Wilds. Both of those names are probably familiar to you if you ever listen to the Serial podcast. They come up a lot, and they are witnesses in this case. So the call occurred at approximately 7:06 or 7:09 in the evening, either or, just like very precise, not like a approximately. I just find that odd. Anyways, so Jay had paged her a short time before, and she was returning the page. The number that he left for her was the number ending in 9023. So that number was the number to a cell phone. The defendant's cell phone, in this case, Jen Pusateri, called that number. The defendant answered. She asked for her friend, Jay. The defendant said, He can't come to the phone right now. We're busy. He'll call you back," and hung up. "Can't come to the phone right now. We're busy. He'll call you back," and hung up. At the time that the call was made, the defendant was standing in Lincoln Park burying the body of his girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. You're going to hear how Hae Min Lee and the defendant were students together at Woodlawn High School. They had been together for years, and they were both in the honors program. Keep scrolling up. They were both in the honors program at Woodlawn. As many of you probably know, it's a magnet school where the honors program students go. They met there. They'd known each other for a while in their junior year. They began going together, and both of them loved each other very much and both sacrificed for the other. The defendant sacrificed things that were very dear to him, his religious beliefs and the way that his family looked at him. The defendant is a Muslim, and that's going to come up a lot in this case too. Just an FYI. I do believe that the prosecution might use it a little bit against him in some ways, in a negative sense. But they definitely use it as, he had a strong faith. So in that faith, premarital dating is not allowed, and premarital sex is absolutely forbidden. He had to sacrifice those values to go with Hae Min Lee. His family, which was a Muslim family, wanted him to live by Muslim values, and he sacrificed there too. In essence, he made his life a lie so that he could have this woman, and it caused problems for him. You will hear how at a homecoming dance in their senior year in fall of 1998, the defendant went to the homecoming with his girlfriend, Hae Lee. The defendant's parents appeared, and you're going to hear from Lynette Woodley, the principal at Woodlawn, about how the parents of the defendant pulled him out of the dance and were creating such a scene that she had to ask them to separate, to break it up, because they were causing a lot of disturbance. You're going to hear from Hae Lee that she was very, very aware of the problems that this was causing for the defendant. We're going to include here her diary, in which, in her own words, she will tell you you're going to get a lot more, but it's going to run something like this, which is from her diary. This is approximately July 16th of 1998, continued at 12 p.m. He went to Texas with his father for some Muslim convention thing. He called me on the 17th, Friday, twice at 1:30 and at 8:30 p.m. with calling cards. Isn't he sweet? I keep crying over the phone because I miss him so much. Then he went into a whole explanation of the purpose of the trip to Dallas. He told me that his religion means life to him, and he hates it when he sees someone purposely going against it. He tried to remain a faithful Muslim all his life, but he fell in love with me, which is a great sin. But he told me there is no way that he will ever leave me, because he can't imagine his life without me. Then he said that one day he would have to choose between me and his religion. This is exactly what Savik was talking about. I love him so much, and when it comes down to choosing, I'm going to let him go his own way. If you have to deny yourself a part of you for love, then that's not good. I really couldn't care less, since my religion means shit to me, but to him, his religion guides his life. It's the world to him, and I hate the fact that I'm the cause of a sin, no matter what he says. The defendant sacrificed. So that's the end of her quote from her diary. The defendant sacrificed, made a lie of his life, But Hae Lee sacrificed too. She loved the defendant so much that she saw it wrong for him to be in his relationship with her, and she sacrificed. She loved him so much that she was willing to let him go because that was the best for him, and it was not easy for her. Shortly after the homecoming dance, they broke up one time. She was in love. She couldn't stay away from him. They got back together. She finally got her strength together towards this November, December, and broke it off for good. Started a new life for herself, started dating a new person at the time, but still deeply loved the defendant, but sacrificed the selfish love that she felt the need to be with him, for the unselfish love of doing what was best for him, letting him go. The defendant did not realize the sacrifice that she made, did not realize that what she had done was an act of love. The defendant got caught up in his honor. The facts will show that at this point he felt betrayed, publicly humiliated, and enraged. He set out to end Hae Min Lee. You're going to hear from Jay Wilds, who knew the defendant because his girlfriend, Stephanie McPherson, went to school with the defendant and Hae Lee. And occasionally they double dated. You're going to hear how the night before the defendant called him, said, "Let's go shopping," or I want you to take my car tomorrow. So the next morning, the defendant skips out of school, meets up with Jay Wilds, gives him the car, and at the time says, "I'm going to end Hae." Jay, thinking that this was just male posing, says, yeah, took the car and left. Let me change that. Might be easier. Okay. So after... Alright, well, after the day went by, in the afternoon, about 2:30, 2:40, he gets a page. And he's got the defendant's car. He's got the defendant's cell phone. He gets a page to meet the defendant at the Best Buy. He meets the defendant there. The defendant has Hae Min Lee's car and says, "Look, I did it." Pops the trunk, and there's the body of Hae Lee. At that point, Jay Wilds is totally shocked and stays in a state of shock. When the defendant asks him to help him out, get rid of the body, he helps him. Just, okay, I'll help you. Cover up the unaliving of someone? Sure, no problem. That's how later, at 7:06 or 7:09, they were both in Lincoln Park. You're going to see certain exhibits. On the most important, one of the most important is one which the defendant's cell phone records. There are the calls that were made to and from the defendant's cell phone on January 13th of 1999, and you'll find out that calls that are dialed on the phone, they keep a record of the number that is dialed, but for incoming calls, you probably have cell phones. You've probably seen this on your own records, which I just want to point out, this is 1999. Not everybody had cell phones. I had a pager at this time. That was like the extent of affordable technology to teenagers. So I don't know where Adnan has a cell phone, but he does. Not a lot of people had cell phones in my high school in 1999, so I don't know. But he did for some reason. All right, so So the prosecutor's saying, you all have cell phones. You've probably seen this in your own records. The numbers are not indiscernible. Just the fact that it's incoming. So they don't get, it's not like phones now that will, with caller ID. You didn't actually you just got the phone number coming in, which that's still kind of how it is with cell phones. All right, so just the fact that it's incoming. Oh, they didn't even get the numbers. They just got said incoming call. If you didn't have caller ID back then, is what they're saying, I think. So, well, we've got two calls at 7:09 and 7:16, both very brief ones, and with cell phones, as you're probably aware, they're made through radio waves where the companies put up towers, communication towers, that cover a certain geographic area. These are called cell sites. Most towers have three sides, an A, B, and C side. And a phone that is in a particular area will lock onto the tower that is dominating the cell site. And the call will go through there, and they can record the cell site. So both of these calls, the 709 and the 716 calls that Adnan's phone received, both of these calls were made in this sector, I guess, with the regarding the cell sites. So this L689B, we'll just say ending in B, or 9B, we'll call it. So, which is a cell site where the telephone communications pole is located at 2121 Windsor Garden. You're going to see another exhibit, which is a map of cell sites and how they correspond to the city. And you're going to see the 689, the cell covers Lincoln Park. That both of those calls were made from the Lincoln Park cell site. And you're going to hear how the body was buried and recovered from Lincoln Park. The defendant answered his phone twice in Lincoln Park while he was burying the body. You're going to hear that information. You're going to see the cell phone records. I don't know if that's what the cell phone records do show, but all right. So, because I know there was a lot of discrepancy with the cell phone sites and the cell coverage in this case, because, I mean, especially back then, we didn't know much about cell phones as we do now. And our technology was like way below what it is today. So, I mean, you can't really be sure of its reliability totally at that point. All right, so anyways, you're going to see this map, and remember, this is what the state is going to show you throughout the trial. So that's what their opening statements are. It is kind of like a preview of what you're going to see throughout the trial. A preview of the evidence, let's say. But it's not like a trailer. All right, so after they buried the body, they went over to Edgewood Road, which is off Edmondson, a couple blocks in and a few blocks down. It's a couple blocks from Wilkins. They left Hae Lee's car in an apartment complex parking lot area. In the last episode, we pulled up some pictures from when they found her car. We looked through some evidence last time. We looked through some pictures. All right. So anyways, you can actually... Oh, wait. Here. Yeah. You're going to see that the two calls immediately follow the Lincoln Park ones. One is L653A and one is L653C. And they they gave off a tower on, or what's the word? They connected to that tower. It just says they have off a tower on North Apple Avenue, and that's right here. You can actually follow the progress of the defendant's car leaving Hae Lee's, going Edmondson Avenue. The earlier car being on the east side of the Apple Avenue Tower, the later one being on the west side as they're driving on Edmondson back to Woodlawn. You're going to hear how in the car there is a map, one of those ADC map books. Out of the map, a page was torn. That page was the map of Lincoln Park, the part of the city that included Lincoln Park. That map was recovered slightly wadded up behind the drivers, behind the passengers, in the rear seat floor behind the passenger side. Exactly the place where someone who was sitting in the driver's seat using it to direct himself after he was through with it would lean over. So someone crumbles it up and throws it when you're done with it. That's like, what are you saying? Under the passenger seat while you're driving. So they're saying after he was through with it, he would lean over naturally. His arm would go behind the driver's seat and put it on the floor right there. You're going to hear how the map that the page was torn out of has the defendant's fingerprint on it. You're going to hear the testimony of Jay Wilds. We're going to read through all of it, both times, both trials. And you're going to see the cell phone information. At the end of this case, we're going to come back and be able to argue this for you. And at the time, I'm going to ask you to come back with a guilty finding for his first-degree premeditated unaliving by the defendant of the victim, Hae Min Lee. Thank you very much. The court says, Ms. Gutierrez. And she says, it's a grueling process by which all of you, 17 of you, there we go, okay. Like, it doesn't want to move fast enough for me. All right, so 17 of you were chosen to sit in judgment of your fellow citizen. Now remember, this is the defense's side. The prosecution gets an opening statement, and then the defense gets an opening statement, and then that's where we're at. So, the defense is now speaking. It is the process that has been evolving, unlike the rest of the world, for almost 700 years to end up with ordinary citizens who stands up before the very citizen whose charge they undertake. I don't thank you for enduring that grueling process. It is your obligation as citizens, whether you wish to be here or not. And it has been written that to sit as a juror is the highest of obligations that any of us can aspire to as citizens other than to live law-abiding lives. Sorry. As the judge told you throughout the trial and at the end of the trial, he acts as an umpire. He will rule on objections, and at the end, before you are asked to decide, he will instruct you on what the law is around this case and these charges. The trial is not like a movie. So the little trailers that you might be used to that Mr. Urich referred to, she's going back to his movie trailers, not only should be of no help, you should put them out of your mind, because this isn't a sales event trying to entice you to get to come in and buy a ticket to see a movie. And the way that those trailers are designed to highlight certain things in them so that you will come and plunk down your money so that you can find out what the end of the movie is. A case about someone's life being taken and a trial about the same are among the saddest things that can occur. A trial for a life being taken itself is about the grief that occurs when the fellow citizen their life is ended, whose life is snuffed out. All of it is ugly. One of the things that the judge will at the end of this case, and many of you asked during the voir dire process, that means in French to speak the truth. We were asked to speak the truth. You look at an oath to speak the truth. Or you took the oath to speak the truth. Every witness who comes in this courtroom will sit in that chair and take an oath to speak the truth. But you jurors were asked to speak the truth about your own lives and your own experiences and what you know and what you heard about anything so that a fellow citizen, as the judge will tell you is presumed innocent, is wrapped in a cloak of innocence that starts now and will remain not until the word is unless you are persuaded by a burden that's the highest in our country's laws to persuade you with their evidence. So it's their burden to make you believe that he's guilty. You are meant to come in here presuming that they're innocent, and the burden is on the state to prove that he did something, that he's guilty of something, some kind of crime. All right, so this is your job. Their obligation to do is to persuade you of that. In addition to being very sad, you must by necessity learn that some things about these young people that otherwise you might not care about, I speak to you about them because I believe they are important, that you understand the context of these things. Adnan Syed is an American citizen. He was born in this country like most American citizens. He happens to have been born of Pakistani extraction. His parents are American citizens by choice. For those of you, you may or may not know some of the history of Pakistan, which is a country that was formed in the Arab world in the tip of the landmass called Asia. She says something is in the northwest corner of what was once India after India broke and got its independence from Great Britain after years of colonial rule. And Pakistan was formed because with India, hundreds of years of settlements from Hindus and Muslims did not get along, and subsequently Pakistan broke off. Those of you who are old enough, not all of you are, I barely remember the newsreels of the Muslims going one way and the Hindus going the other, trying to keep peace in a region that was not endured an abiding peace for more than 60 years. And at some point, many Pakistanis, the bulk of whom are Muslim, but not all, the bulk of whom were Muslim, many of them came to this country to seek peace and economic opportunity. They escaped their own country and escaped to opportunity for their children after decades of war. And they came to this country as immigrants, much like over 300 years ago. Not all, but many of our people's ancestors came as immigrants. They brought with them their religion, Islam. They brought with them their own language, in addition to the Arabic of Islam from the dialect that was spoken by their people. And they brought their customs and ways of life. And when they got here, most of them, like all the rest of us, had children, and they formed communities as Muslims and Pakistanis. They formed a community centered around a mosque that is called the Islamic Society. It is located right on the far side of Security Square Mall. If you went to the top of Security Square Mall, there's a road that borders. It's a rolling road. And if you follow the rolling road over and under 695, you'd take a left on the Johnny Cake Road. And shortly after you take a left, you'd have to take another left and you'd be essentially following 695. And there on the right-hand side, on a huge tract of land that's barely visible, if you didn't know it was there, you'd go right past it. It is edged by pure residential neighborhoods on one side and by 695 on the other. But if you happen to know where it is, you go in. It is fenced, and the mosque is in there, which is a building. And recently, much later than Adnan's majority, he is now 18, there is an addition to the mosque, which is a building of worship. But in the United States, we recognize all religions with the same belief and protection. On the rest of the world, Islam is a major religious force for people in many different countries, Arabic and Asian, but all over the world, Muslims live. It is a monotheistic, they spelled that wrong, monotheistic, Muslim, the religion is monotheistic, which means that they believe in a single God and they believe in a way of life. And most of their value system is not very different than those of the major religions around the world. They're based on the Judaic ethic or the Christian ethic. One God, belief about the quality of life, that your life is beyond yourself and your life is beyond your own self-gratification and satisfaction, that you are to do good deeds, think good thoughts, live a good life, speak to those speak to those and care for those less fortunate. And one of the marks of Islam all over the world, across countries, cross races. Whoops, I went too far. Is that they pray 5 times a day. They operate on a different calendar year than the Gregorian calendar and most Christian religions of the Judaic calendar, which doesn't recognize other than the dividing point, the birth of Christ, that is the basis of most Christian calendars. And the Islamic calendar, which runs approximately 12 months, but on a different system, there is 1 month that the Islamic calendar use as a sacred month of renewal and discipline, and a call to the faithful Islamic to come together and do certain things to remind them of the discipline of their faith. It is a month called Ramadan. Its first day this year, in the Christian calendar that our city and state and nation follow, it starts today. It is a holy month that puts on Islamic, wherever they are, special obligations. It requires people to fast. Unlike Christian fasting, it forbids the faithful to not only not eat, but to not drink, not pass water, which is very dangerous, by the way, to teach themselves for a month the discipline required to live a good life. While just like others of the other faiths came to this shore, they bring their language, their customs, and their religion, and their tenets and the values of life. So did the Muslims of Pakistan, many hundreds of families of which came long before 18 years ago, when Adnan Syed was born. Sorry, hold on 1 second. All right, so they settled here and they took over a mosque that has been in existence for a long time, and they took it over as a community. And they strained to teach their children their Pakistani customs, their Pakistani language, dialects, a way of life, a way of food, a way of growing up, a way of striving for things. Just like every other group of immigrants, they followed the law. They sent their children to public schools. Today, next to the mosque building at the Islamic Society off of Johnny Cake Road, in addition to the house of worship where the faithful of Islam gather, and particularly during Ramadan, 5 times a day to pray according to the book of their religion, the Quran. That's also spelled wrong. To pray and open their souls and their hearts to the discipline of the world of Muhammad. They now have a school, and in that school they seek to send their children, and they seek as a community to have all of their children go. And just like everything else in life, they've had to struggle to raise the money to build a school, to fund it, to have educated and certified teachers that are there so that they might teach their children what they need to grow and flower as members of society consistent with their Islamic beliefs. Adnan and his older brother and his younger brother, like many of the hundreds and hundreds of families that have to take advantage of. I don't know. I missed whatever that sentence. What did she say? Oh. I hate these pages. They move like they're so slow. Okay. Adnan and his older brother and his younger brother, like many of the hundreds and hundreds of families, however, did not take advantage of this, is what I think. He went to public school through the primary years. So he didn't go to these schools for Islamic teachings. He went to public school. And he ended up at Woodlawn. All right, so, and just like you must know from your own knowledge and study of history, every immigrant group who has come to these shores has struggled to assimilate, to learn how to function day to day, learn a new language, learn different ways of looking at things, learn a different culture, different things to eat, different ways to buy, different economies on all levels, and wanted and have always wanted over generations better lives for their children. That's why they came. They're young children, as you might expect, just like many of the immigrants, like just like many other immigrant communities, learned quicker than the adults. The adults related to each other as adults through the mosque, sometimes several times a day. Most of the Pakistani Muslims were well educated and skilled, and they brought that. And they wanted their children not assimilated because, as strict Islams, they believed that the Islamic faith meant that they should transfer that to the children so that their children would grow up with the same abiding faith that they, for generations, have lived for many, many years. In the same way, every parent transfers to their children their beliefs and how life should be lived. And that's important. What values is as to certain things. How do you grow up? What do you look for? With whom do you mate? Now Islam is a very strict religion about certain things, but make no mistake, there is no religion that is recognized or practiced on these shores that does not stand for the same things. There is not a single active religion that condones, as a matter of something probably premarital sex between unmarried children, underage children, but for generations of human beings, a millennia back and more millennia since then, young people have ended up pushing the bars of life further and further. Young people have always gone beyond their parents. Some become and some remain as strict as their parents were. Some embrace those parental values and religion and styles of life, but not all do. And there's nothing different about the impact of that flow of knowledge and behavior and choice of lifestyles in this community. The Pakistani Islamic community that has ever happened anywhere in the city, in this nation, among Catholics, among Jews, among Eastern Europeans, among Italians and Greeks. Notwithstanding parents' attempts to keep their ethnic, religious, moral, cultural lives alive for their children. Because of what modern life is, children of all places, particularly in public schools, have mixed with each other. Children end up in different places, oftentimes than their parents. The hope of the mosque is in building the school is to prevent the impact on their children in what they view as the outside world, and every year they add a grade so that it is a fundamental Islamic school system where they can keep their children away from the evilness of a world that they interact with, but they know does violence. Okay, that is the world of Adnan Syed that Adnan Syed came from, and that friction certainly caused him friction. Now Adnan, and you will learn this from everyone, his friends, his teachers, friends of Hae Lee herself. Adnan was a young man who was liked by everyone. He was a leader, he was a scholar, he was an athlete. He was a leader when he was in junior high. Everybody wanted to be Adnan's friend. He was outspoken, he was smart, he was quick, he was disciplined, and he viewed himself up until a little past the middle of his junior year as a strict fundamental Muslim, as a good Muslim. And in his way of life and his family culture and in the culture of the mosque where he went every day, almost every day of his life, until he was accused of this end of a life. In his junior year at Woodlawn, most of his class from the middle school went with him. He went into Woodlawn, and because he was a scholar, he was in was in the gifted and talented program. And those kids who came from not just from his middle school, Johnny Cake, but other middle schools. Woodlawn is a big high school in Baltimore County. He had classes with other gifted, talented students. Now, one of the persons with whom he attended class in middle school is a girl by the name of Stephanie McPherson. And she was also a scholar and an athlete. One of the things you will learn when you look at this group of Woodlawn kids, Hae Min Lee, whose end of her life brings us here, Adnan, Stephanie, others' names that you will learn. It is among the most diverse group of kids you would ever meet or see anywhere, racially, culturally, languages, religion. But those divisions that divide adults, and have always divided adults everywhere, didn't seem to impact the kids. The kids grew up with the diversity and never questioned it, and they based their ability to make friends that would last a lifetime based on how they saw and interacted with people. Stephanie McPherson, who also ended up at Woodlawn, and Adnan, notwithstanding their differences of race, Stephanie McPherson is an African-American girl. Their differences of gender, their differences of religion, they became among the closest of friends. In fact, junior year and the junior prom, Adnan was elected the prince of the group, and Stephanie was elected the princess. No surprise to anybody. Everybody in that school, teachers and students alike, liked them both. So Adnan was a very popular kid, apparently. So they were both gifted and talented, bright, disciplined, young people who did the right thing, who did their homework, who engaged in class, whatever it be, calculus or physics or English lit. They were bright, exciting young people. Their teachers thought so. They thought as much of each other. Up until the middle of junior year, Adnan viewed himself as a strict Muslim, although he, like most of the young people from the mosque, with whom he saw and interacted every day at the mosque, at the nightly prayers, because of the mosque, like most good religions, know that they must keep their young people close. So they had things at the mosque for young people to do. They had athletic leagues, they had basketball courts, they had young people's activities that went on every night to involve the young people like Adnan in their activities. And up until the time that he was a junior, Adnan regarded himself as a strictly fundamental Muslim, and unlike the rest of his crowd, he didn't believe in things like dating. If he were to date anybody, it would have been Stephanie, but she was with his best friend and accepted that. Or she was his best friend and accepted that. He also was dating, or she was dating, Jay Wilds during this time. All right, so he viewed himself as a strict fundamental Muslim, so they never dated, and all the other girls would look at Adnan, and he was cute and liked, but he was off limits to everyone because he was a Muslim. And because they'd existed around him all of his life, nobody challenged him. They accepted that's what he was, that's what he did, that's what his life was about, and they never pushed it. In junior year, back to Woodlawn, came a young woman who, you will see, was also a gifted and talented scholar athlete. She was Hae Min Lee. She is of Korean extraction, and although her religion did not play a daily basis impact on her life in the way that Adnan's did, she grew up her formative years in Korea and then came to this country, and her mother, with whom she lived, tried to be pretty strict with her and tried to insist that if she was going to date, that Hae Min Lee had to bring her dates home. She had to meet the boy, know from whence he came, as most good mothers would do and want. Hae Min Lee was a little bit more connected with the mainstream culture, and when she came back, she was here and left. She and her mother went to California, where they lived with a man that Hae Min Lee called her dad, although he was not. And when Hae Min Lee disappeared on January 13th, most people thought that that's where she went. To be with the person that she referred to as her dad. And why was that? Because she had talked about it. She had talked about the deteriorating relationship with her mother, and had always said that she would go off and live with her father. It turns out afterwards that all those that thought that she had gone to go see her father were wrong. He wasn't there. There was no, people thought he was actually her father, but he was not. There was no blood relationship at all, but she had grown up with him and thought of him as her father. She wasn't intending to delude anyone. Sorry, it's hard to read. But the first thought that came in everyone's mind that knew Hae Min Lee, she left to go to her dad's. That's what she had said. She had reported to teachers and friends alike difficulties, perhaps in retrospect, minor difficulties, but to a teenage girl. She had reported them as if they were major difficulties, so nobody was surprised on the 13th. Because when you're a teenage girl, everything is dramatic and life-altering, and it's, yeah, the world's ending kind of thing. So even if she was having, some arguments with her mom, she might have over-dramatized them or whatnot. So nobody really knew, if she would have left on her own or something. So, except that on the 13th, within minutes of her not showing up at a place where she was expected, not only did her family report her missing, but the Baltimore County Police opened up something they've never before done, an immediate investigation into a missing persons that they're, inaudible, cut her off. The transcriber couldn't get it. And among things that were done that very evening was that Hae Min Lee's younger brother, I believe it's her younger brother, Young Lee, he read her diary. And you will see all the entries in her diary, and this should give you pause. It is a sad thing to have to read the diary of a young woman whose life has been snuffed out. But in that diary, on the next to the last page entered, the last entry is on January 12th, and on January 12th, she talks about how she is in love with a boy, or rather, a man, of the name of Don. And on the page before the last entry, she writes on the page over and over and over again, like teenage girls are wont to do, his name, Don, 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 a few hundred times or more on a single page. And at the top of the page is written in her handwriting a number, and the number turns out to be Adnan's cell phone. So she's writing I love Don all over her page, and she's writing Adnan's cell phone on the same page. It's a little weird. Several days before the day that Hae Min Lee disappeared, Adnan asked one of the elders in the church to assist him in getting a cell phone. And you will hear from that elder that he had done that with other young men, and one of the reasons is that because they were under 18, they really couldn't get it themselves, and for many of them, like Adnan, their parents didn't deal with like day-to-day stuff. Sorry, my thing just flickered. All right. So they wouldn't deal with like the day-to-day stuff of the daily Baltimore life. They wouldn't go and didn't go because their lives didn't connect with malls or cell phone stores or those kinds of things. And many young men in the mosque would turn to the elders who had more regular dealings with life and understood better sometimes the needs of young growing men who were really torn about the call of the religion and the strictness of it, and what they learned every day from going to high school with the young Americans who they came from different places. So kids are trying to assimilate, and their parents aren't necessarily. So the elders at the mosque are helping the kids get cell phones and things like that so that they can deal with day-to-day life stuff, because their parents aren't necessarily assimilating to the culture, the technology, things like that. And several days before Adnan had gotten the phone, it turns out you will hear that mostly Adnan, who previously had a pager, wanted the cell because he wanted the cell phone because he wanted an easier way to connect with young girls. Adnan, as you will hear, not all, but many, at least some young men of the mosque, notwithstanding their heartfelt commitment to Islamic tenets and their clear understanding that their parents did not approve, and their clear understanding that they were not to date, that dating any unchaperoned visitation between girls and boys was not permitted. Although there was no prohibition between a Muslim marrying someone from another faith, but there were prescribed rituals to men and women, and the postponement of the dating ritual that really is an enormous phenomena of America, not to any other culture in the world, as to how young people, boys and girls, awaken to each other and date. What whatever that means, earlier and earlier, and how it's more and more important at a younger and younger age. You'll hear from most of the young men of the mosque that Adnan fit into the same category. He was a later bloomer than any of them. Most of the younger men his age, not all but many, had already succumbed and had decided on their own. Whether it is right or wrong, it is not up to you and this jury, but your knowing it is important. Adnan was a late bloomer and came to it late, but that he began to do what most of the other young men in the mosque did. They sort of secretly dated. All of a sudden, they discovered girls. They discovered sexual urges. They discovered sex. And they all sought to engage in it. And because their lives were for a great deal, again, not all but most, lived outside of their parents' scrutiny any time that they were outside of the mosque, even though they were there almost every single night, participating in the prayers of the community or participating in the activities of the young people. Most of the ones you'll hear about pertain to the young men, because in Islam, the men and the women are separated and kept separate except for certain prescribed activities. That's what they believe in. Again, it's not your call to decide whether it's right or wrong. In the middle of junior year, which would have been the spring of 1998, Hae Lee, who had come back from California into the group of gifted, exciting young people, came in right at the time when Adnan succumbed to what were to him natural urges, and he and Hae Lee sort of hit it off. Unlike Adnan, Hae Lee had already, like most of the young people who surrounded these two, unlike Adnan, who was still a virgin and had never engaged in sexual activity. Very unusual for a 17-year-old boy from a major metropolitan area. No matter what we think of it, it's what our young people do, and it's not very different what young people have always done. Perhaps some of you, when you were that age. Adnan responded to Hae Lee. She was beautiful and exciting and bright and disciplined, and they could only conduct their relationship in secret, not only because of Adnan's religion, but because of her own strict mother, who had not allowed her to date randomly or anyone, so they did. But of course, the only people to whom it was a secret were Adnan's parents and Hae Lee's family. Everyone else knew it. All the kids in school, every day, they saw each other every single day. 5 GT classes a day, and they passed love notes to each other. And Hae Lee, the court chimes in, says, "How much longer will you be, Miss Gutierrez?" She says, "Another 15 to 20 minutes, Judge." He says, 15 at most. So now she's on a timer. So thank you. And Hae Lee, well, she probably had a specific amount of time to talk. They weren't given a lot of time, actually, to speak. Anyway, so thank you. And Hae Lee, she says thank you to the court. Hae Min Lee would pass notes and pass around her diary. Everybody read her diary. She didn't write in it every day, as you'll see. The one notation that is missing, Mr. Urick referred to, was this homecoming dance that occurred in the fall. In the spring, and there was no mention of this homecoming dance or what happened at all. You will hear about it. It was an important event for both of them, but not so important to a young girl who recorded all other of her feelings of undying love for Adnan, and who recorded all of the troubles young people have when they're breaking their own vows to their own family. Not just Adnan herself. Her lying to her family. From the spring, the junior prom where they went together, and you'll see from the pictures, they made a beautiful couple. They were both beautiful, exciting young people. You'll follow that throughout the summer, they remained each other's best friends. Everyone around the world would know their ups and downs. You'll see from her diary how very jealous Hae Lee was. The least little thing she would regard as Adnan flirting with someone else or paying attention to someone. She was a very jealous young girl who, when she couldn't handle it, would do something that she refers to a recess in their relationship for hours, for days, for weeks. Let's take a recess. I insist on a recess. you know exactly what the word means. Let's take a break. It would be arbitrary and capricious, and you'll see from the diary just how arbitrary and capricious she was. But she proclaimed her love for Adnan, and it continued notwithstanding the pressures as it began to get out. As most things can't be hidden, get out. And Adnan's parents and family became concerned that he broke their trust, or his trust with Muslim, and that they would have to intervene. So his parents getting involved again. And they attempted to intervene by reminding him and doing in the Muslim faith what is called advising him, reminding him of his obligations as a Muslim, because that's how fundamental Islam is handled and treated in this country, notwithstanding Islamic societies elsewhere. In America, it's evolved something. Okay, I don't know. But the court reporter missed a few of her words. Throughout the fall, Hae Min Lee and Adnan went back and forth. Break up, back together. You'll see from her diary, even as she's beginning to respond to a man, not a child, by the name of Donald Kleindienst. I don't know how to say that. All right. Kleindienst? Sure, we'll go with that. That she wrestles with herself because she really was not prepared to give him up. You will hear in this trial that on the day that she disappeared and a few days thereafter, that everyone who was asked on that day or within the week all described, yes, they broke up, that they were good with it, that they loved each other, that everybody knew that Adnan knew of her new lover because that's what he was. Had met him, had been up to there, and the teachers even described the two of them as best friends. Adnan wasn't asked until later. The first time that he was really asked about what he did on the 13th of January was on the 25th of January, and there was a follow-up call on the 25th of January. So they really didn't ask him about his alibi until several days later. So Hae Min Lee's body had not been found on the 25th. He was called by a Baltimore County detective in a follow-up to the missing persons investigation, and he said, oh yeah, I remember the next 2 days were snow days, which you'll hear they were, the 14th and the 15th in school. They had snow days. And you'll hear that the following Monday was a scheduled holiday. It's a Martin Luther King's birthday. And he said, when asked what he did that afternoon, he said, I went to track. Now at track, they don't keep, there's no sign-in on a daily basis of what students go. And because then, just like it would be now, months run, it is a little bit different this year. The 13th was at the tail end. It's the high holy days. So that must be in Ramadan. Yeah, something we would apply to the month of Ramadan. And on the 14th of January, Adnan, along with a handful of other young men, some of whom also went to Woodlawn, led a prayer in the holy month of Ramadan. It was a big deal for the young men to lead the congregation in prayer, and so the days prior to that, Adnan, as one of the young men leading the prayer, practiced and recalled that afternoon, 15 minutes after school ended, up until past dark, because he ran for the entire indoor track team, went to track practice, although he could have been excused because as a Muslim, the regulations of the school would have been to excuse his participation because he was fasting from water and food, and you can't work out, without water, so that's a terrible idea. And he would have been fasting from sunrise to sunset. So you will hear that Adnan's first recollection, and you will hear that he was a disciplined athlete who seldom missed. And at the next meet of the Woodlawn indoor track team, he medaled in his relay. He wasn't just a sometimes athlete, he practiced. He didn't take advantage of the excuse that he would have used because that was the first and only time he was asked to focus on it. And others who might remember all of his whereabouts also were not asked until much, much later. But what they will be able to tell you is that they would have noticed his absence. They didn't, because it was Ramadan at the general prayer that was concluded at the mosque every single day of the month of Ramadan, which went something. The only person who puts Adnan doing anything, burying her body, being at probably Lincoln Park, is a person by the name of Jay Wilds. Jay Wilds went to Woodland High School several years before Adnan and before Hae, but he hung out. So he was already graduated, and he was an older guy that would come back and hang out with some of the high school kids, like the older kids. So he was different. And Adnan and Hae and Stephanie and other names you will hear, Asia and Terry and Chad, he was different than they were. He wasn't a scholar, Jay. He wasn't an athlete. He wasn't disciplined or serious about anything. But for some reason, late in the junior year of Adnan, Hae, and Stephanie, Jay Wilds took up with Stephanie. So Jay starts dating Stephanie, who's a senior there. The court reminds Miss Gutierrez she has 5 minutes left. She says, "Yes, Your Honor." Stephanie was since gone on to college. Oh, so Stephanie had graduated. Like almost all of these, by the time they went to trial, I guess, Stephanie was in college. So she might have been a year older. Anyways, Jay and Stephanie became an item. And because they became an item, Jay was accepted by Stephanie's friends, like Adnan and Asia and somebody else and everyone else. Now Jay was different from them, not only in that he wasn't going on to college. He worked at PetSmart, which will become important to you. And he works at an adult video club. It's a P video club. He dealt a little bit of legal substances on the side, and he'd deal those substances to some of the young people who, not surprisingly, in addition to experimenting with sex, they were all late bloomers, were experimenting with these substances. Sorry, my brain stopped for a second. And Jay was accepted into the group. He also didn't have his own car, not then, not now, but ordinarily, on a daily basis, he'd borrow one of the kids' cars. Stephanie, his girlfriend, mostly, she'd give him her car. These were not rich kids, but they worked hard. The parents worked hard. They were thought to be deserving of it, and many of them had their own cars. Adnan had his own car, and on the 13th was not the first day that Jay borrowed the car. He'd borrowed it before and brought it back. But one thing that you will notice from this list, you'll hear witness testify to, is that there are calls on that day, like the one. Whoops, my dog threw his bone off of his bed. On the 13th was not the first day Jay borrowed Adnan's car. He'd borrowed it before, but one thing that you will notice from the list, you'll hear witness testify to, is that there are calls on that day, like the one that was described to you from Jennifer Pusateri, that do not appear on any other day. They're all calls related to Jay Wilds. They never called before. They've never called again. You can, from those calls, understand that the cell phone was in the car and Jay Wilds was in the car. But it is only Jay Wilds that puts Adnan in the car at the same time. We hope to take you to Lincoln Park so that you can see with your own eyes the desolateness of Franklin Town Road and the distance and the difficulty of the terrain that this Jay Wilds, apart from this group of kids, describes watching, a burial 127 feet off from the center of the road into terrain that back then was never ordinarily traveled and could not be gotten to easily or readily. The court says, 1 minute, Ms. Gutierrez. She continues on. There is much else that I'd like to discuss with you, and it's not my choice to end now. I've spent some time with you on the things that may not be important, because I think that they will become important. Judging a person's life and who they are is one that you are called to do. When Hae Min Lee disappeared, no one thought of Adnan. No one ever even guessed Adnan. Was he their former boyfriend? Yes. All persons, her family, her brother, all their friends, all of the teachers described, though, that they'd had this hot and heavy thing. They were still friends. They still saw each other every day. You'll hear that Adnan was in and out of Hae's car. She only had use of a car, not every day. Oh, here. Okay, please wrap it up, Miss Gutierrez. She continues, he was in and out of her car on a daily basis for the 10 months from the time that they became lovers in early April up until the end of December. And all they got in her car were some hairs discovered on her body, and the discovery of her body is so bizarre, you will understand why the person that discovered it was treated as a suspect in her unaliving, both initially and for a while, because it doesn't make any sense unless you are looking for something back there in the woods of Lincoln Park. All I can do is leave you with Adnan in your charge and ask you to live up to your oath of listening with an open mind, presuming Adnan innocent of what he's charged, and remembering what he has been and what he has. Something inaudible. Okay, that was not a very impactful last statement because I don't know what that means. And the court says, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the end of opening arguments. And sorry, I was just reading that last thing. That was the end of it. This is the transcript, the end of the transcript for the opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense. I apologize that my first recording, if you did go on to that one, I had no audio, but it should hopefully be better now. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Adnan, what you think of Jay, what you think of the whole case in general, what you think of Serial podcast. When did you start getting into Serial, if you ever did? Anyways, let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye.